All right. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to thank you again for joining me for session number 2 in the AT3 Center PDF Accessibility series. This is going to be a session on remediating an accessible PDF. I have on the screen for you right now, and I'll kind of let people start. I see some people still coming on, so we'll kind of start with this. I'll just repeat one more time for those of you who have already been on and heard this a few times. We do have some documents we're going to work through today. So I'd like you to go to A11Y, which is a11y.okabletech.org/downloads. There will be 2 documents there for you to download that we'll use throughout the session today. So I'll give everybody a couple of seconds to kind of get there, ask questions if you need to, and then we'll move on to start. I will put this in the chat again here. Let me know if you don't see it in the chat. And I'll just repeat it one more time aloud as well. That link is a11y.okabletech.org/downloads. Okay. Hopefully everybody's able to get those downloaded. And that link is there for you in the chat if you didn't catch it when I said it aloud. So hopefully that should get you where you need to go. So again, this session today is about remediating an accessible PDF. And I want to thank the AT3 Center for having me here again today to discuss this with you guys. Also, thank you to the captioner. We have captioning online as well. The webinar and the resources that I will be sharing with you today will be shared on the AT3 website. So we'll give you an update on when that happens. But yes, we are recording, so you will be able to replay anything that I do as you need to. So if you're new here today, this is your first webinar with me. Now, my name is Lissa Prince. I am an ICT Accessibility Coordinator at Oklahoma Able Tech. So we started last month with the webinar about what a PDF is and how to get your Acrobat Pro set up to be ready to remediate a document. Today, I wanted to build on that and talking about a few more concepts and kind of getting into the meat of actually doing some of these within Acrobat. So I wanted to first hit on some initial considerations that you might want to think about when you first receive a PDF that you need to do some remediation on. I also want to talk about changing existing tags as well as adding new tags, depending upon the case that you're in. I also want to hit a little bit more on artifacts. I know we talked about those last month, but we'll give a couple of specific examples of what those look like and how you get them marked as artifact within Acrobat. We'll also talk about reordering tags to match that reading order concept we discussed last time. And then we'll also talk about links. There are some special considerations you need to take with links, especially if you have a document that has been converted into a PDF and has no tags. Very, very important to consider in that case. So first off, some things that you need to consider before you even start to think about tagging your document or editing the tags that are already there. Things such as color contrast and also the use of color, which hopefully you remember from last time is the need to actually convey any important information with the use of color in addition to something else. So never just using color alone to define information. We also want to think about any of our styling. So that could be size, color, where things are on the page, anything like that. Those things are all things that are very difficult to actually edit once you actually get to a PDF format. The reason behind that is that Acrobat doesn't particularly play very nicely with any edits that you make within a PDF. So sometimes it can actually, especially if you've already done a lot of work with the tags, as we're going to kind of do today, it can actually mess with that tag structure and kind of cause complications for you down the line. So it's always important just to take a second before you start tagging a document or work through the tags and just make sure that anything that you could address in a Microsoft Word document or any other source document is considered before starting to tag. Otherwise, you could end up with a document that may be mostly accessible, but isn't as accessible as it could have been. All right, so now I'd like to get into talking more about tags. And I know we talked a lot about tags last week, and you're going to be like, Lissa, you just talk about tags all the time. But these are very, very important. So once you get the idea of tags down and how they move and function, you've really got PDF remediation close to down. So the example that I have on the screen here is a screenshot of the document that we'll be working with today. And then I have two tag trees to the right, labeled number 1 and number 2. One of them is correct and one of them is incorrect. So I'd like to give you about 30 seconds to kind of compare these two and see which one you think actually fits better with the screenshot that's on the left-hand side of the screen. Once you have figured it out, I'll just like for you to put which number 1 or number 2 you think is the correct answer into the chat. So I'll give you some time to look at those things now. Getting some answers in. Great. Awesome. You guys are doing very well. Oh, that was an accident there. Okay, looks like I have a lot of the same answers coming in, so we'll go ahead and kind of move on. And again, this will be there for your resources later if you need to look back and kind of reference what we decide here. So the correct answer is actually number 1. So I'll kind of go through one by one and just kind of talk about how this is accurate and versus the other one. So first off, for reading from the top to the bottom of this document, we have a picture, which is actually the logo. My creativity was running a bit dry, so the logo for this is actually just a bit of a school and with kind of a steeple on the top of it, and that's to serve as a logo for what I'm calling Access University. And then below that, we have a heading, which is, I'm calling the heading 1 for this page, so it's the most important heading. Below that, we have a subtitle, an instructor information heading, which is going to be a main subheading under heading level 1, so that's a heading level 2. And then we have 2 heading level 3s, instructor and email, and within each of those we have, for the top one, the instructor heading 3, a photo of the instructor, some text that describes the picture, which is just the instructor's name, Dr. Sue Flowers, and then the third, or the second heading level 3, I'm sorry, not third, has an email address for this instructor. So if we go to our tag trees, we kind of start comparing. The first tag is the same figure, so that's actually what we call an image in tag tree language. And then next we have a heading level 1 on the left-hand side and a heading on the other. So while heading is actually a tag, it doesn't actually accurately represent the fact that this is the main heading level 1 for the page. So we wanted that to be a heading level 1 instead. As we go down, they're pretty similar, but you see in there's a difference between the middle section. We have actually swapped the heading 3 for instructor with the picture of the instructor. So I know these things look a little abstract, but I wanted to go ahead and point out at this point that what you guys just did is really, you got to your end result, which is kind of putting all of those pieces of content within a nice filing cabinet. They're in a very organized fashion now. We know what they are. We know what the type of content is, and we have a document that can be read by assistive technology. So breaking that down a little bit further, those tags that you saw in that tag tree are kind of like file folders. So if you think about that heading level 1 that said English 101 syllabus, that is actually the content that you're going to put in your file folder. And then the type of that file folder is actually going to be a heading level 1. So you're kind of putting a label on that file folder. So if you start to think about this kind of concept in this way, then hopefully it's just sort of starts to look familiar. You know, you're familiar with file folders. You can even think of it like buckets. But once you kind of understand this concept, you're well on your way to understanding tags. All right. So I mentioned earlier that we have 2 cases normally when we receive a PDF that needs remediation. So in some cases, the document has tags already. That may have been a document that came from a Microsoft Word conversion to PDF. But we also could have a document that has no tags. So this could have been a document that maybe was printed to PDF from Word, or it could have been something that was a scan originally. So those are the 2 cases that we normally are dealing with when it comes to PDF remediation. So in the first case, if a document already has existing tags, we will start editing them through the properties menu. So the approach is going to be very different than if the document doesn't have tags. If the document doesn't have tags, we actually have a step before we even think about tagging, which is running OCR, which is optical character recognition. I don't have time today to go through a process. That can be one of the things that takes a little bit of time to check, but just know that it's there, and we pulled the tool out into our toolbox last month when we met. So you have 2 options for adding your tags manually. You can either use the reading order tool to tag each of the pieces of content one by one, or you can actually use the auto tag document tool, which is in your accessibility tool, to tag the entire document at once. And what it's really doing in this case is kind of guessing what the document looks like. So it's kind of going off of how large text is in relationship to other text, if there are bullets and things like that. So it's really just making an educated guess on what your tag structure might be. So it may be good, and it may also get nothing right. It's very much a toss-up depending upon how your document originated. So my recommendation, for what it's worth, is that you kind of start out just using the reading order tool. Maybe once you've gotten to a point where you feel pretty comfortable with the reading order tool, you start using the auto tag feature to kind of see what it does differently and compare and contrast, because as you go along your PDF remediation journey, you'll kind of find that different options work for different solutions. All right, so before we get to that step, I'd like to move out and go into our document. So what I'm opening right now is the document that says incorrect tags. So it's a pretty long title, but it's English 101 Syllabus AT3 PDF Webinar, Incorrect Tags. That's the one we're looking for. So I wanted to start with showing you what it looks like to change the tags that have already been there, been placed into the document. So we're first going to start by identifying where our content is. So we can do that, and I kind of mentioned the highlight tool before. But you can actually click on the headings. I'm sorry, the tag for this heading, which we already know is incorrect based on our first exercise, but we'll get to that here in a second. We're going to click on that, and we notice that our English 101 syllabus text has been highlighted. So basically, going back to our analogy of our file folders, that means that this English 101 syllabus content is actually properly contained in that file folder with the label of heading. And if we open that up, that's what we can actually see. That the English 101 syllabus content, which has this little box icon, is actually contained within that file folder. So that's sort of where that idea comes from. All right, so What I recommend though is always kind of keeping these closed, especially as you start to edit them, move them around, as we'll get to later in the process here. But our first thing that we want to do is actually identify any tags that have the incorrect type and then change them to the correct type. So on this tag, which is called heading, we want to do a right click and then go to properties at the very bottom. And we have a little drop down menu. And if for some reason your window opened up and it's not on the tag tab, that's the one that you're going to want to open. So once you're on that tag tab, you can change the type to be a heading level 1. And once we did that, it happened really, really quick. So you may not have noticed, but this actually changed from saying heading within the brackets to saying H1. So that's an abbreviation for heading level 1. So it's always good to learn to go change your types here so that you know what abbreviations are going to end up here. All right, so as we go down through our tag tree, we'll just start, or we'll keep identifying the content and see if, you know, what we think about it. So if I go down to the paragraph tag that's below it, and again, paragraph tag is abbreviated just as a P, so we sometimes call them P tags. You can see that this is actually just highlighting an empty space. So we're actually going to skip that for now, and we'll come back to it when we talk about artifacts. Next thing, we have our figure tag, and that is actually highlighting that logo up at the top. So we already know there's potentially something wrong here because things are out of order, but again, we'll have to wait to fix that until we get through this section. But if we keep going down, we can see Fall 2020 as our subtitle. We have another blank space, and then we have a heading level 2 that's highlighting instructor information. We keep going, heading 3 is for instructor. We have the figure, we have an empty space, we have the Dr. Sue Flowers caption, and then a heading 3, and a link, and it looks like everything else is good to go. I'm going to stick to the first page for remediation for this particular demonstration so that we don't have to do too much, but everything else looked like it was accurate. So we're going to kind of leave that at that, and just know that anytime you have an incorrect tag, it can be changed through these properties. I also wanted to point out, and my document somehow is closed, so let me open that up real quick. So now we'll move over to the incorrect tags document, and we'll start looking at that one. I'm sorry, the no tags document. So when we open this one up, we'll notice it looks a lot different. So our tag tree actually says no tags are available for us. So that just means that we need to put these in. So what I'm going to do first is open up my accessibility tool, and then I'll show you around here very quickly, just as a reminder. But when I was talking about the auto tag document function, that's actually here within this accessibility tool. So if we wanted to choose auto tag, we could do that and see what kind of tags it put up. We have our accessibility checker under full check, and then we have a few other tools which we'll kind of cover as we go along. But the important one right now is reading order. So we're going to open our reading order tool, and it kind of gets in the way sometimes. So normally I like to try to drag it off into a place where it makes more sense for the document that I'm working on, because otherwise it's hard to see what you're doing. So once I've gotten that kind of out of the way, I'm going to start tagging content. So the first thing I'll do is look at my logo, and this is the part that can get kind of tricky. But you have a cursor that appears, and you're going to want to click and hold and drag. And we want to get that whole entire image, and I didn't successfully get it. So I did that time. So what we want to make sure and do is that a pink box, that highlight box, appears around the content that we want. So you'll also notice I accidentally grabbed this extra paragraph character that's just hanging out in there. And we'll just leave that for now. There is a way you can kind of unselect that, but that's a little bit harder to demonstrate. So we'll just leave that for now, and we're going to actually mark this with a figure tag. So what I just did, just to kind of repeat, was highlight the content that I wanted, made sure it was highlighted with my content highlight box, and then I chose my reading, or chose in my reading tool the figure option, and then that created a figure tag for me. So again, stuff happens pretty quickly, but if you notice to the left in your tags tree, you actually have a figure tag that appears for you. When we open that up, our image is in there and contained in that little tag for us. And I'm actually getting somebody, Mark, thank you for that. Mark is correct. You can actually, if we were to be able to undo that, you can actually double click the image to do the same thing. Okay, so if we were to keep going, we're going to move on to our English 101 syllabus. So can anybody remember which heading level we are going to assign this particular piece of text? If so, let's put it in the chat. H1, awesome. All right, so I'm going to highlight all of English 101 syllabus. And again, I didn't catch it all. You do want to make a pretty wide box around it. So I got it the second time, and now my highlight box has highlighted the entirety of that text. So we will go to our reading order tool with that highlight still intact, and then we'll click heading 1. And now our heading 1 tag has appeared. So that's pretty much the process. As it goes along, we can keep doing some. I'll just kind of show you a couple, what the other tags might be. So we'll highlight fall 2020 now and click text paragraph. And for those of you who have this document open, you can kind of keep going if you'd like, or if you don't, that's totally fine. But it's kind of a repetitive process. The other thing I wanted to point out while we're in this particular section, I'm going to close out my reading order tool. And if you've ever potentially gotten a document that's pretty long, this is just a cool trick to be able to find your tags, or where your tags content is located in your tag tree. So I closed out my reading order tool. I'm going up to my toolbar at the top and clicking my selection tool. And I'm going to just highlight the text that I want to find. And then, this is a pretty short tag tree, so this should be pretty obvious. But for demonstration's sake, we'll go up to the tags top section. We'll right click and we'll click Find Tag from Selection. When we do that, you actually see that that content has then been opened up and expanded to show you where in the tag tree it is and under which tag it has been actually added. So that's kind of an easy way for you to find content to make sure it's tagged, especially once you get into some larger documents. And I'll repeat that one more time. We close things back out. So let's do fall 2020 this time, but we're going to highlight fall 2020. And again, you have to make sure your selection tool is checked. And we're going to click that top tags root and click, I think I unselected it. So we'll highlight that again, right click and click Find Tag from Selection. And that opened up our fall 2020 content under that paragraph tag for us. Okay. So again, you have those documents. You can kind of keep playing with that after we get done with this, and kind of, I think it's a muscle memory sort of thing. I think it sort of gets more familiar to you as you go along. Anyway, but I'll just pause right now and make sure no one has any questions. before we move on. Okay. Okay, so I do have a request for how to get the tags bar on the right side. Are you meaning the tag tree or the reading order tool? Okay, so just as a refresher, if you somehow either missed last session or just happened to accidentally closed it, if you want to add your tag tree back, let me unmark mine. So if you want to add your tag tree back to your left-hand side pane, we're going to just right-click on that pane and then click Tags. And then your tag tree should appear for you. The alternative version of that is to go up to your View menu and then go to Show Hide, and under Navigation Panes, you're going to click Tags. So there are two ways of doing that. And I'm sorry that it didn't stick for you. It's supposed to. We can turn that into Adobe as a bug. All right, so if it looks like no one else has questions, we'll go back to our slides. And we will look at what we've got so far. So, so far we've kind of started building out our workflow. So our first step is again to consider things that can't be fixed in Acrobat, such as color. That's just the stuff you want to make sure and have completed or fixed before you even move into tagging a PDF. Step 2, if it's a scanned document, run OCR. And step 3 is add tags if there aren't any tags. All right. So let's move on to two new topics now. This will be artifacts and reading order. So just a reminder on artifacts, they are used to hide elements from screen readers and Braille displays. So they're going to be content that doesn't convey any meaningful information. Some examples I gave last month are some headers and footers that automatically created in Word. Those actually do come over and are artifacted automatically normally. But we'll talk about how to actually artifact things that come over that are just those extra paragraph spacings, for instance, that we had in the document I was showing you before. And we'll also kind of go over a quick example so that you can start to kind of think about what you might want to mark as artifact or not. So in this first example, this is again from our sample document from today. We have just the section taken out for that's got instructor, that heading, and then a picture below it of the instructor herself, and then the caption below it is Dr. Sue Flowers. So I will just take some votes on this. So how many of you think this actually needs to be marked as a figure? And kept in the tag tree? Okay, I see a raised hand, so I think that's a yes. All right. Forget about the raised hands feature. Yes, so go ahead and raise your hand if you think this needs to be marked as a figure in the tag tree. Okay, I've got 3, few. All right. So let's talk through this for a second. So if you think about the alt text that you might put on this picture, it's probably just going to be the instructor's name. So in this case, since we have the caption below it, it's actually going to be repeated potentially if we put some alt text on this figure. So somebody hearing this read out loud to them, for instance, might hear instructor heading level 3, and then Dr. Sue Flowers, and then Dr. Sue Flowers again, after it's announced the image, of course. So we're really duplicating information here. So instead of keeping this in the tag tree, we can actually take advantage of the tool that Acrobat offers us and mark this as an artifact so that it's not repeated twice. Now, the logo that I have on the right from the top of the document is a little bit different, right? If we go back to our document and look at it, or just have it in your mind, hopefully, the logo doesn't have any information around it. It's just the logo itself. There's actually not anything that says Access University on it. So we'll do the same kind of thing this time. Do you think that this logo should be kept in the tag tree as a figure and given alt text? If so, raise your hand. All right, I'm seeing a few more hand raises this time. Yep, going up, going up. Awesome. Okay, and yes, that should actually be kept in the tag tree in this case as a figure that has alt text describing the image, since the logo is still conveying important information about the name of the university. Okay, so switching gears for just a second, and then we'll kind of go over into the document and apply the artifacts and make those things artifacts we just talked about. We're going to talk about reading order one more time. So our reading order is very important. We want to make sure to rearrange the tags to match that visual order of the content as it should be read. So our tag tree should flow from top to bottom according to how the document is read from left to right and then top to bottom. We can either use a drag and drop or we can actually use a copy paste to rearrange the tags to meet the reading order that we need. So I think that's best illustrated by going into our document. So we'll open that back up and I'll move over into our incorrect tags document again so that we can start fixing the things that we were finding earlier with the reading order issues. So we'll kind of go back to our artifact idea first. So again, we're going to go to our accessibility tool and open up our reading order tool. And once we have that open, we can go see what kinds of things we want to mark as artifact. So you'll notice also when we opened our reading order tool, as long as you have the show page content groups checkbox checked, it will start showing you how things are tagged on the page just using these visual markers and the corresponding tags that go with them. You can also look at the page content order here as well. I typically will leave it on here, on the structure types, just to kind of get an idea, especially at first, of what tags are labeled as what. Okay, so once we have our reading order tool ready to go, we can kind of start looking through and seeing some of the stuff that we found earlier that we need to mark as artifacts. So we already talked about this image, which we'll get to, but we also uncovered some paragraph characters that were just randomly hanging out in the document. So sometimes this happens when you press the Enter key to create a space between paragraphs, or it can happen at the end of a table, for instance. Sometimes around images, which is why you're seeing the one that's directly after the icon I have in there for the, for the logo. So anyway, as we go along, we'll just kind of start doing the same thing. We can actually click and drag and hold to select that whole paragraph character that we don't want in there. And then we can click background artifact on our reading order tool. And once we do that, that's actually going to be disappeared from the tag tree. Sometimes, for some reasons, Acrobat holds on to the content kind of behind it, but it is marked as an artifact. So it still may show up here for you, but the important thing is to keep looking back at your tag tree and to make sure you don't see what you don't expect to see. You know, I think you guys have kind of figured out at this point, remediation isn't difficult necessarily, but Acrobat is really, it has some quirks for sure. Okay, and we'll keep going, and we actually noticed, I think below, this is a paragraph spacing that's just been created using an Enter key. So that's when we just created some space between Fall 2020 and instructor information. So we'll highlight that again. We'll see our pink highlight box appear, and then we'll tag it as background artifact. So that made that disappear as well. So now we go find our tags. We start kind of scrolling down through those, just using the down key right now. And we'll see that those are gone from our tag tree. So that is step one. Then we also wanted to take care of our picture down here. So we've decided that this doesn't actually need alt text. It can just be marked as an artifact object because we have our paragraph below describing it. So I'll show you one other way to actually mark things as an artifact. So I'm going to click on my figure and make sure that the image of the instructor is highlighted. And so we know we're on the right tag. I'm going to open that tag up, look at the content below it, and here you can actually do a right click on that content, not on the figure tag itself. So you're going to actually want to open it so you can get to the content within it. Do a right click and then click change tag to artifact. So I'll just repeat that one more time. We're finding the tag that we want to make an artifact. We're opening it up to get to the content below it, and then we're right clicking and clicking change tag to artifact. And gives you an option, so you can just make it a type artifact type of page and attach it, but this isn't super important, so I would just click OK. So then we're left with an empty tag, which we can actually delete. The reason we can actually delete this, and I'll make this this is a very important caveat, we don't want to start deleting tags that actually have content within them. That's when we can run into problems with content not being accessible at all to assistive technology. So if you think back to the examples we talked about where you have a scanned image, if you remove the content itself, then that basically is like that content isn't there. But it really goes against standards. It's not what we're supposed to do. So it's an incorrect way of actually taking content out of the tag tree and hiding it away from assistive technology. We don't want to do that. So back to this particular situation, this figure tag doesn't have any content below it. And we can see that because it doesn't have an arrow to the left of it. So we can actually delete that tag and it'll just be gone. And we've done what we need to do with that. The other thing we can do, and I think this is a safer option at times, we can actually go up to our tags root. We can right click on it and then click delete empty tags. So again, I'll just do that one more time. We go up to our tags root, do a right click and click delete empty tags. We don't want to click delete tag because that'll delete all the tags we just worked so hard on. We want to make sure and click delete empty tags. And once we do that, our tag is now gone. So there are just a couple of options for you. Choose which one you like best, but those should get you the same result. Okay, we'll just go ahead and finish this out, but I want to kind of find where we left off. So we were at the instructor heading 3. We made that image an artifact, so now it's removed from the tag tree, and we still have this paragraph spacing character hanging out that we want to get rid of. So I'll just do the same thing with this one as I did with the image. I'm going to open that, right click, click change tag to artifact, click OK, and then I'm going to delete that tag. The delete key on your keyboard also works as well. All right, so that is tagging in a nutshell, really. And I also wanted to point out one other thing that they've done to really improve your experience as someone who's working in the tag tree a lot. Recently, Adobe has actually put in an undo feature. So if you're familiar with using Control-Z, you can actually undo what you just last did in a tag tree. So for instance, if I realized I didn't want to delete that tag, I'm just hitting Control-Z right now. It brought that empty tag back, and I can then delete it because it doesn't need to be there, but that was just for illustration. So that's just kind of a safekeeping feature. I'm really glad they added that. I think it is a very handy feature to have. Okay. Next thing, let's move back to my PowerPoint. So kind of thinking about building onto our workflow. We have now just added steps 4 and 5 of marking any objects that don't need to be a part of the tag tree as artifacts. And then we want to arrange the tag tree to match the visual structure. So that's that reading order checkpoint. And I'll also kind of put in a caveat here. Step 4 and 5, this is kind of where we get into, it can go in whatever order you want it to. The first 3 pretty much need to stay in the same order, but I'm sure you find as you go along that you may want to move a tag as you're changing the type of tag. So you'll start to get really familiar with these things and probably start combining these things into one. So it will be more of a checklist in the end than a workflow. Okay, our last 2 topics are alt text, and then we'll briefly cover links. So alt text needs to be added to any image that you have within your document. So that can include an infographic, a chart, a table, sorry, not a table, just regular pictures or anything like that, as long as it conveys information. Again, we've already talked through our artifacts, so we want to make sure that anything that still needs information remains in the tag tree and then has defined alternate text in the document. So we can add alt text 2 different ways. So one is actually kind of a bulk edit that is available in our accessibility tool, and you can also add it through the properties manually. So I'll show you those here in just a second. And the last thing to cover is links. So Word does a pretty good job, even if it's not a very accessible document, of creating the links for you. So those may already be there, but you're still going to need to make sure they're properly into the tag tree. So we have kind of 2 different competing things with links to think about. And I've left the structure you're looking for in the end in as a slide you can refer to. So we want to first have a link tag, and then we're going to have the content in it. So that's actually the link text that you see that's highlighted or underlined. And then we want to have another tag that's link-objr. So what that stands for, technical terms, is object reference, and what that means is it's actually the clickable element. So you're tagging the text itself and also that clickable element of the link. It's very important to get both of those things. Okay. Moving back into our document, just wanted to really quickly show you how to add your alt text. So we don't need our reading order tool anymore. I'll close that out. And I wanted to show you the accessibility tool. Once we have it open, there is the feature called Set Alternate Text. And what this does, if you open it, it'll say, I'm going to detect all the figures in here that need alternate text, and then you can add it in here. So this is kind of a good thing to do for bulk. Now, this is something I hope they fix in the future, but marking, you can actually mark things as decorative, which makes them artifacts like we've been discussing so far. But this feature, for some reason, doesn't quite get everything out of the tag tree all the time. So I wouldn't necessarily use this feature to mark anything as an artifact. I would just use it to add the alternate text for images, especially if you have a lot of images within your document. So in this case, I just want to make this the Access University. So that's what I need to put in as my alt text. That's the thing it's conveying to anyone who's familiar with that logo. And then we'll click Save and Close. So again, that was kind of, we only had one image we really wanted to tag, so that was kind of overkill for what we wanted to do there. But alternatively, you can actually right-click and click Properties, and then go to your tag tab, and you can see the alternate text there, and you can add it there. So once you add it in, I think you actually have to click off though. I think that's the important thing about this. You click off and then your alternate text is saved, and then you can click close. But that's the other way to do it, or just to check to see if you have good alternative text. Next up, we have our links. So what I'll do is go over to my document with no tags. So this is, again, this is going to be more important if you have a document that's not got any, any accessibility built into it at all. But instead of using our accessibility tool this time, we're going to click our edit PDF tool, and we're actually going to add these links manually. So if we click the link button in the top of the toolbar and click add or edit web or document link, we can highlight that link. And this is just going to basically put a rectangle around it. It's going to make any part of that rectangle clickable or be able to be activated by a keyboard as well. So we want to click open a web page. And in this case, this is actually an email address. So the trick for that is to put mail to before it and then sflowers@university.com and then click OK. So now we've added our link. The next thing we want to do is make sure it's in the tag tree. So I can close out of that, and right now it's not in the tag tree, and we can see that. But I'm going to go to my tags root. I'm going to right click and click find. We have a new find element box that pops open, and we can use the drop down to actually click unmarked links, because that's what we're looking for, is links. And we're just going to leave it at search page, and since this is a one-page document, especially doesn't matter, we'll click find. And when I clicked find, you should have noticed it highlighted this link we just created. So once we have that highlighted, we'll click tag element, and we're going to put in a type. So we're going to go find the link tag and click OK. All right, so when we open that, you'll see that the link has the object reference tag underneath it. So that's definitely what we wanted it to do. The other thing that we haven't gotten yet is that text. So we want those things to be combined. So what I'll do is actually go back to my accessibility tool, click reading order, and I'm going to highlight that email address and click text paragraph. So it did create our paragraph text down below, and now what we can do is actually drag our link into the paragraph, and then we need to move this. So this is one of the more advanced things, and that's why I left the example of the tree structure there for you, so that you can kind of use it to match this up. But after we've done this, then we have our link that contains the text and the object reference that it needs. So it will be clickable and announced to assistive technology. All right, I also realized that I kind of left out a part there. I was getting too excited when I was doing the talking about the reading order options. So I want to go back really briefly and talk more about the drag and drop and the copy paste feature. So I've moved back over into my incorrect tags document, and I wanted to show you guys that this order is wrong, right? We've already kind of figured that out as we've gone through the rest of these exercises. So our heading 1 is actually second on the page, and if we click down to highlight our figure, that is our logo. So that's actually what needs to be first. So this is where we're going to use our drag and drop feature or our copy paste. So you can kind of do this either way, works for you, but I find it easier to, especially at the top of the tree, go from up to down. So I'll move this heading 1 to where it needs to be underneath that figure. But I want you to pay really close attention to these lines. So I'm just barely moving my mouse, and you see the line has shortened. And what that's doing, click off of that. What that's doing is it's actually going to paste it, or move it underneath as a nested tag of that figure. We don't want that. And the only reason that content is opening is because I'm hovering for so long. So that shouldn't happen to you if you're just clicking and letting go. All right, so we want to drag it, make sure we have the long line that extends past the icon and past the tag name, and then we'll drop it. And then our tags are reordered. So now figure is above heading 1. The copy paste feature, and I'll kind of just think I have everything in the right order now. But let me just undo that since we have the handy undo feature. And you can actually do a cut. It's actually not a copy, it's a cut. So this is probably what you're used to, when you're working in a Word document. The Control X function does work on your keyboard if you'd like to do that. But if you right click, just so I can illustrate, you can click cut, and then what you're going to paste is actually going to go below the tag that you are going to select to paste it under. So right now I'm going to try to paste it underneath, not nested underneath, but below that figure, which is our logo. So if I right click and click paste, they've just rearranged just like they did with the drag and drop. We'll talk a little bit more about the paste child feature in next month's webinar when we talk more about nested lists. But beyond that, this is really the gist of PDF remediation. And I'll go back to my slides one more time. And we've just added 2 new things to our workflow as we've been going along here. We need to make sure and add any alt text or add alt text to any images, charts, graphs, etc. that convey any meaning. And we also need to make sure the links are in the tag tree, as well as active links. Okay. I wanted to provide a couple of tips as well. So I kind of like to run the accessibility checker at first. If I get a document in and it has tags, it's always a good idea just to check to see what it might tell you about it first. But remember that accessibility checker isn't going to catch things like color contrast. It'll warn you that you need to check it. But again, I think it's why it's such a good thing to run it at first, just so it sort of reminds you of the things you may forget, because honestly, when dealing with this kind of stuff, it's kind of easy to forget. So we need little reminders that we can get. Also saved often. So any of those things that we were doing, if you happen to have a glitch in Adobe, many of us have encountered that have worked with PDF documents at all. It can often be pretty discouraging to have done a whole bunch of tag work and then have to go back and redo it all. So just reminder to save often. I kind of tend to save after I make a big change, or especially if I'm working with a list or a table, which we'll see more next month. I typically try to save after I'm done with that, just so I know where I kind of left off, and I can quickly pick it back up if need to. I've also included some resources here that you can use at your leisure. These are all good articles to point you to some things about PDF, and we have a quick guide listed there at the bottom for you as well. That's from us at Able Tech. We have 2 more sessions. The next one is May 19th. It's accessible tables in PDF. And then we have in June 16th, accessible PDF forms. All right, and last thing is just an announcement. We've actually started doing office hours. So the link is there for you guys, and I can drop it in the chat as well. But we are offering office hours on Thursdays from 9 to 11 a.m. Central. So they're 30-minute sessions, and you can ask any questions that you need to. We just ask that you kind of send us a question ahead of time. And now I'd like to stay on and answer some questions. Oh, and I've included my contact information there as well. But it looks like I have one Q&A. So let me see what this is. I don't think there's an option. Okay, so I think the question, and I'll just kind of reiterate, deleting tags versus artifacting tags. Deleting tags could actually remove your content, period, from the tag tree. So while it's going to leave something out, it's just going to look like something is wrong with the document. So artifacting is still always the better option. Okay, and then I have another question. Could you have clicked on properties of the link OBGR for the link and put the information that way instead of using the reading order tool. I think the answer to that question is no. I think if you were to add a title to that link, well, I can't say that word, OBJR tag, it's actually going to not capture that text that's on the screen. So you still need that content in that paragraph tag, as well as that, or that came from the paragraph tag, as well as that link OBJR and the link tag itself. And if that doesn't answer your question, let me know. All right. All right, somebody's asking to go back to the, let me get the other slide back up. Okay, so the slide's back up for the dates. And then I have a question, if you have an inline link, does the text link need to go in a span that contains the link? It doesn't necessarily need to go in a span. The important part is that that link tag itself contains the content, which is that text for the link itself. I think that answers your question. So the span tag is just not the important thing, it's just the link tag is. So you can have it in a span tag, but it's not necessary. All right. Any more questions? I am happy to stay on for a second. I think the captioner has to go at 3 p.m., so we won't have captioning after 3 p.m. Okay, I'm being asked to show the resources slide again. I'll move back there. Oh, wrong direction. There we go. And I can also post those in the chat if it's helpful. Oh, I'm also getting a question. Why does the word path show up a bunch in a bunch of my tags? So path is actually, do you remember back to that paragraph spacing character we looked at? If I were to open those actually are going to say path. It's just indicating that there's a character, but it's not actually text character. So it's not going to actually be announced, you know, like something like a T or anything like that. It's just a blank character. So that's what path means. It also can be an image, like a line or something. So often you'll see path in the link tags, for instance, after you've tagged that content, the text link itself, because it's got an underline. So that underline is actually going to be a path, but path isn't a bad thing. That's just something you kind of have to start to ignore as you go along, and I hope that answers your question. All right, so what version of Adobe Acrobat do I use to remediate? I'm actually using Adobe Acrobat Pro DC. It's the one that I think it updated last week, so it's the subscription model, which is what we recommend anybody doing PDF remediation getting if you can, just because it has the most up-to-date accessibility features within it. All right, any more questions? Last call. All right, so I have another question about links. So let me go back and show you the sample, what we did. Go find it. So to answer your question, this link tag is going to be what actually allows the assistive technology to realize it's a link. And then this is the text that goes with it, the content that goes with it. And then this is actually that clickable link. So I think the answer to your question is yes. The link needs to show up twice because one is the text itself and one is the clickable part. Okay. All right, well, we'll go ahead and wrap up. But thank you guys again so much for joining in today. I hope this was useful. If you'd like to schedule office hours, please do. And also you can email me if you have any questions that don't require a 30-minute meeting with us. But yeah, looking forward to next time. We'll talk about tables and some lists as well, since we didn't get to those today. But yeah, hope everyone stays healthy and well, and I'll see you guys in May.